So let's talk about those top issues facing voters right now. We're talking about immigration, the economy, and inflation. How do you plan A, on dealing with them, and B, reaching across the aisle to deal with them with Republicans as well?
Well, the first thing is to understand that in a legislative body, you have to work with other people and you have to have broad coalitions. And sometimes those coalitions form issue by issue. I might disagree with somebody on one issue, but we find common ground on a second issue. We work together where we agree. The idea of joining a splinter group and being with the splinter group through thick and thin is not a productive way to operate. You wind up isolating yourself, and you also wind up being involved in more of the polemics of government rather than policy. So the first thing is that as a Democrat, working within the Democratic group, and I do have a number of individuals who are in Congress now who I served with in the state legislature, including Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries, who are both members of the Assembly together. You develop a couple of areas of expertise where you're able to work with other colleagues and offer ideas and suggestions as they craft legislation or as they craft fiscal policy, programs that tie into whatever continuing resolutions are or in the budget in general. Affordable housing is a major issue where I am at. I'm in the suburbs right outside of New York City. It's a desirable suburb. There's a lot of pressure, market pressure on housing prices, which drive the prices up. And people who are working for a living and both families, both spouses working, still have trouble affording a living environment here in an area like this. You need to be able to look at and address that issue in a reasonable way. There's quite a bit of concern about job growth. And as much as there are new technologies that are starting to move the economy forward, we have to make sure that those jobs are in technical areas, science and engineering, that those job opportunities are there so that people can sort of go through the process necessary to train and to be able to compete for those jobs. And that's what's going to get them the next 30 years of their work life. Some of the old technologies won't get them there any further. We have to be able to make those connections. Climate change is very important. I think we see with the increased number of storms, the intensity of storms, there's an issue out there. We have to develop strategies. We've had some of them to deal with them already, and we have to work through that. And so what do? You sit there representing, as I would, an urban and a suburban district in and just outside of and in a little bit of the New York City suburb. And you look for people who have similar type districts with similar type problems. It may be a suburban legislator outside of Philadelphia. It could be a resident of Ohio. It could be a Congress member who comes from Maryland. Those are areas that are somewhat similar to mine. I've happened to live in those areas during my corporate years. So I see some of the similarities. And so you find common ground on the issue specific. I've done that at the local level. We have Republican and Democratic county executives work together to prevent polluted water in the Hudson River. And so you must do that, not let the differences that you have on some issues stand in the way of the compromise that you're seeking to find on other specific issues.
That's a really interesting point. And I am curious, is there a member of Congress who is currently serving that is the type of lawmaker you want to emulate?
Well, it's a good question. And, I've known a lot of them who I consider to be very capable people. In the state of New York, Joe Morelli, who represents the Rochester District, was the majority leader of the New York State Assembly when I served there. I consider Joe a role model. He's younger than I am. A lot of them are. But he's a role model, I think, in the way you approach issues and policies. Pat Ryan, who I served with, he was a county executive in one county as I was in a nearby neighboring county. I think has proven to be a very effective congressman. And there are members on the Republican side of the aisle. I know that campaigns are still ahead of us. Democrats want to win seats, not necessarily advantage Republicans. But there are some Republicans out there whose records I look at and I find on some issues that we'll find common ground. So, I think, Brittany, the idea for me when I go down is to be flexible in the way I look at building friendships, relationships, that out of those friendships or relationships, coalitions. I'm not the kind of guy to defriend you if we disagree on an issue on Facebook or Twitter or something of that nature. And I think that mindset amongst enough of us is how you begin the process of finding